Welcome everyone to the CEO AMA. Marcel had the first question. Maybe somebody else can verbalize because he's not on the call.
Yes, I'll verbalize. And if you're not speaking and you're not Sid, can you mute your audio? Thanks, everybody. Okay, number one, Marcel asked, with the Summers Contribute 2022 canceled, we're discussing other ways to start getting back together in person, and it seems like we might start with small region-specific events, which I'm looking forward to. At the same time, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the pros and cons of regional events versus team-centered events. The planned team-based was what I was most interested in at Contribute. And we have a lot of folks not muted, so let's mute. So do you want to answer that first part?
Ready? Let's go.
Sarah, can you unmute yourself?
Isn't there magic?
Okay, I'm going through.
So yeah, thanks. He elaborated that he wants to meet up with other people of his team, like people have been working for years with people they've never met in person, and I totally understand that desire. Ideally, we do a global meetup. That way, you can meet all your team members because they'll all be there. I don't know, it's a lot of fun to see the entire company. I think there's a special feel to that. And at the same time, it's a cross-functional event. If we do team meetups, I think we have a lot of the same problems we have if we would do a global meetup, just at a smaller scale. People have to travel, sometimes more than a day of travel. It doesn't make sense to do that for short times. You're going to do a longer event. And if people test positive, they have to quarantine at that location for days. So I don't see kind of global meetups, but just with my team as a great solution. One other problem of that is that you don't get the cross-functional interaction. And as a functionally organized company, we'll have many communication breakdowns between functions, not within functions. So it's really important that we keep a cross-functional element to meetups. On the other hand, I can totally relate with Marcel that he wants to meet some of his other team members. So there's no great solutions here.
All right, let's see. And Pedro and Victor had comments. Are either of you on the call to verbalize?
I'm here. I'm thinking of consuming Sid's response, as I think my comment is irrelevant. Thanks to that. Thank you, Sid, for the response.
Cool. Manuel, number 4.
Yeah, thank you. I recently saw that you are another AMA, that you're an investor in a photovoltaics company, so solar power, which aims to make PV modules much more efficient. Can you share or recommend any resources on that topic which you use for your research and which is like covering probably, hopefully, like to get an insight into the future of PV power for someone who's interested?
Yeah, for sure. Clearly, outside of GitLab, the company I invested in is Swift Solar, and they make perovskite solar cells. And the idea with perovskite solar cells is that they're at least an order of magnitude more affordable, mostly because the raw materials are more affordable and the temperatures at which you make them are way lower. So that makes it a lot easier. The idea is that they're an order of magnitude lighter than silicon solar cells. They are flexible, like bendable, and that they have great performance, even outpacing most commercial solar cells. So it's kind of the better in every aspect. The catch is, first of all, that the lifetime has been limited, although great strides have been made, especially by Swiss Solar and a few other companies. And the second thing is that there's no experience curve yet, so they're still very expensive. So at scale, they should be more affordable, but you need to get to scale first. I think perovskites, there's a lot of resources. Sid Solar's YouTube account, Twitter account, linked a good YouTube video a couple of months ago. That I think that's a great first resource to start with. And my reason for investing was, well, you always have to ask when you invest, like, why am I kind of the dumbest person at the poker table? Like, why am I investing and not someone else? Like, there's professionals walking around. With Swiss Solar, there were multiple VC firms that had a partner super interested in the investment, but they were blocked from doing so because those VC funds lost a lot of money in the thin cell solar, the last great promise within solar cells. And they were not going to repeat that mistake. While these partners who wanted to invest ended up investing on a personal title in the company. And I thought that was a great relief to me. Like, there was a reason why I was the dumbest person at the table. And that was that people were tried this before and failed, but they tried it before because it's super worthwhile if it works. I thought it's great. And I think climate change is real and a big problem. And solar seems to be the most feasible way to get out of that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Taylor?
And I'll read Taylor's question. Taylor asked, let's see, given the markets and general consensus, a recession is coming, at least in the US, and other major tech companies have paused hiring or had limited layoffs. Can you speak to the impact? Can you speak to the impacts to GitLab? Our growth, our hiring, job stability, or contradiction? I've heard from peers concerned about this from colleagues who may not feel comfortable talking with their managers about this. And I think it being addressed could ease some minds. And if you can't speak to GitLab directly, any general thoughts of the trends?
Yeah, for sure. Or well, for sure, it's extremely likely that we're going into a recession at this point. I'll link something in the chat. Maybe I'll link it under 4D as well. The question is what that means for us. In the last quarterly earnings call, we said we didn't see any of our key business metrics change, and that our pipeline in Europe was stronger than ever. In past calls, we've also mentioned that when we had a short-lived economic shock due to the coronavirus, 3 global airlines with revenues down 90% signed with GitLab during that time. So it's not an option for a lot of companies to kind of not have a digital transition. And sometimes when there's a recession, companies accelerate that. They now want to move to the cloud faster. They want to shut down their data centers faster. If you look at GitLab, like we should save companies money. They can go from paying all the point solutions to just paying us. They should save money on licensing. They should save money on integrations. They no longer have to maintain their DIY DevOps. Those people can move on and do something that saves costs or increases revenue. Many companies have a hiring stop for developers, but they got more and more work to do. So they need to make their people more productive. With GitLab, you don't have to context switch between 10 different applications. And most importantly of all, GitLab gives you a faster cycle time. So you can move to the cloud faster, turn the data center off faster, do what's really important to the business. So we think even in a down economy, there's great reasons to buy GitLab. At the same time, we'll be watching everything, all our key business metrics, including the length of our sales cycles. What gives us confidence to hire? We have last quarter, we said we had close to 200 open vacancies, is that we're growing really fast. So if you grow really fast, that solves a lot of problems, including you can slow down by just hiring less fast, but we're not doing that right now. It's as steady as he goes. We've had the same growth rate as a late stage private public in an up market and now public in a down market. And when kind of a year ago, when the market was on the up and up, everyone said, well, why don't you invest more? Why don't you spend more? Why don't you grow faster? And now they might be saying something else, but we try to keep the companies as stable as we can. Now, there's no guarantees for the future, but that's where we're at today.
Great. And Brock, you have number 5.
Hi, Sid. Yeah, seems to be now related to several questions. So perhaps we might want to move on to Josh's as well as part of answering, because it seems related, which is right after mine. But as we mentioned earlier, for myself, I'm several years at the org without the opportunity of having met somebody in person for GitLab. And as part of that, as we expand and to meet what we need for the org, if it's not the case already, I feel we're arriving at a time where I think the majority of people within the organization are perhaps in a similar situation, very limited time in person with other employees. And as we seek to continue expanding, what are we going to do to start redefining for ourselves and reflecting on the credit values? As we talked about earlier, and I agree, I think one of the components with meeting in person as our own individual teams could perhaps result in well-meaning, but our own individual interpretations of the credit values of the company culture. And that also includes in the ways that we get work done. So with in mind that perhaps this might be something more longer term than we like to think about, the situation with travel and meeting in person, what are some things we could do perhaps to reflect on our culture and perhaps expand on that?
So you're advocating for more in-person meetings, am I understanding that correctly?
Or perhaps having a more serious conversation on what we'll do to help as people are onboarded in and the company expands to ensure we have a consistent culture across the organization, across different, I guess perhaps to avoid becoming siloed in the way that we're working and in the way that we interpret our credit values.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so 2 different questions. The first one, yeah, we want to make sure we meet up in person. There's something special to that. It's very unfortunate that we had to kind of cancel our global get together for the 3rd quarter. There's a draft MR for a travel grant to enable people to meet up, maybe not globally, maybe not as far away, maybe not with your whole team, but regional with some of people in your team, some people from other teams, as a more practical alternative. Regarding your second question is like, how do we make sure we keep our values strong? What comes to mind is a new thing we did the last offsite with the directs and the e-group. We went over them and kind of looked where they were not scaling. I thought it was a great exercise because it showed that we had a very common understanding of what the implications of the values were. So that made me very proud. And there's a list of 22 things we do to reinforce our values. Always happy to add to that if people have ideas or if something isn't working, to reconsider that. And I'll add a link to that from the agenda. So 5G has that list. Josh.
Hey, good morning, Sid. So the company is growing, evolving. We've had a lot of changes, whether it's the IPO or we've hired a lot of new folks. And, so there's a lot of things that are changing company-wide. I'm curious on your take around the company culture and whether the culture needs to change to drive some of the outcomes that we're expecting, specifically like our revenue goals and whatnot. And as I've kind of kicked this thought around with some folks in, inside the org, there's kind of two schools of thought that I've heard. And the first one is, what got us here is great, but it's not going to get us where we want to go, right? We have to change the culture and the way we operate in order to get where we want to go. And then the second school of thought is, what got us here is the culture. It's a huge part of what got us here, and there's no way we're going to get to where we want to go without continuing that. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, given there's so many new hires that maybe haven't been here and experienced the culture for that long, and maybe they're interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I don't believe any of our core values have to change, because we keep hiring. We gotta keep reinforcing those values. Most importantly, who we hire, what based on what we hire, who we promote, who we let go. The second thing is, do we have to evolve? And the answer is for sure. Talk to companies now, like GitLab is so core to their operations, like our reliability is way more important. That's why we've made some big changes there to put a bigger focus on that. I think as GitLab has more and more functionality, usability becomes even more of a differentiator. So we got to make strides in that. But focus more on customer results. We're frequently leading with hey, what are the features of GitLab instead of what can we do? Getting product managers closer to customers. I'm encouraged by all the changes we already made. I think we put reliability on a higher pedestal. I was visiting a global bank, a customer of ours, on Monday, and they talked very highly of their interaction with our product managers who listen very carefully. Also means if the product managers are very close to your biggest customers, that you're going to focus on their needs. That might come at the expense of spending time on innovations. I'm also encouraged by incubation engineering, which is kind of biting off new areas of the product. So yeah, we'll have to keep evolving. We'll do that. I don't think we have to change any of our 6 values, but they'll get different interpretations, or they're not different, but their interpretations also have to evolve. But what does collaboration mean, for example? Does that address your question?
Yeah, I guess I was looking specifically for more internally inside of the company versus how we interact externally with our customers. So maybe the things like results first, right? Like making sure that we're focused on that inside of the company, furthering a nonlinear workday or being supportive of that. Those types of things, are those things that you think we need to change and evolve, or are those things that you think are core to what's going to get us where we want to go?
Well, I certainly hope we can keep aspects of the nonlinear workday for a ton of people, a ton of the time. I think we're still learning. I'm not super proud of I mostly do meetings instead of work asynchronously. So I'm kind of doubting myself, how should I lead in that, and why is that? Why does that feel like what I have to do? In I don't know, some other things that come to mind, we want to get more efficient, but our e-commerce fulfillment setup is not conducive to that. So we're going to make great strides there. We talk about collaboration, but that sometimes means, for example, empowering people to do their work without you, instead of having them always come to you. How can we evolve that? So yeah, lots of things that are changing as we are scaling.
Thanks for your answer.
Thanks for the question. Really cool. Anyone who wants to verbalize a question?
Sid, I'll verbalize one. It's a bit of a change of topic, but just curious, do you have a favorite sports team?
Well, of course, you gotta kind of represent like your old hometown. So in the Netherlands, my hometown had a surprisingly English name for their local soccer team, which is Go Ahead Eagles. Go Ahead Eagles. Got to be fan of the Dutch national team. Got to be fan of the Dutch Formula One driver, Max Verstappen. And now that I say this, those are three Dutch teams in a row. I live in San Francisco. The Warriors won the NBA finals again, which I'm really grateful for. That was super fun to watch. And San Francisco, we're a bit spoiled with all the great sports teams, but I love watching basketball.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I feel like the Warriors have been on a very good run since you've moved to San Francisco. So maybe you're bringing them some luck.
Yes, no help from me, but yeah, it's been awesome to see. And they were a bit of an underdog this year, so that makes it even more fun. There's nobody else. Thanks so much for that, AMA. Appreciate it.